Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions in the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. On this show, I interview lawyers ditching the billable hour and experts who can help attorneys move beyond billing time. Thanks to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later. And use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. You get 10% off, and it supports the show. The best way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. I'm thrilled to have with me today Tim Johnson and Dave Hyams. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Well, we've had a great pre-show chat, but just in case my listeners haven't come across either of you or Longship Legal, Tim, let's start with you. Tell us who's Tim Johnson.
So I'm Tim Johnson, and I'm one of the co-founders of Longship Legal, along with Dave here. And I am a intellectual property attorney who is running a subscription and fixed fee only law firm that we just started last July. And through a little bit of quirk of fate and good luck, I was able to hook up here with Matthew, and greatly appreciate you inviting us today onto the podcast.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm so glad you guys are here. Dave, who is Dave?
So I'll just reiterate, thanks very much for having us today. I am a corporate business and intellectual property lawyer. I've worked at a large law firm in Boston, mid-market consumer electronics company as in-house counsel, served as an in-house lawyer at a large publicly traded internet company. I've done my stint at a clean tech startup in the DC area, and I've worked at several small IP boutiques. And I realized prepping for this call, I've been doing it for about 25 years.
Wow. I mean, I will tell you that the longest, the attorney who's been practicing law the longest, who ditched the billable hour, has been doing it for 40 years, or who's been practicing law for 40 years. But you're up there in terms of practicing law the longest and being able to get out of that mindset. So still, kudos to you, Dave, but also to you, Tim. So tell my listeners, and I'll let whomever wants to start the story about how Longship Legal came to be. So whoever wants to start the story of Longship Legal, take it away.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll take it, Dave, unless you're really dying to give your version of it, or maybe we can both give one and you can see which one's better in the end of it. But yeah, so Longship Legal comes out of Dave and I had worked together previously at another law firm for 9 years, overlapping at that point. And, very short version of that is looking to try to do something new. That firm had been a patent prosecution focused IP boutique. And we were looking for ways to kind of go out and kind of do something new. We maybe as many folks do, wanted to interact differently with their clients, wanted to go, as we kind of say, chase the fun, and do what we knew how to do, but do it in a way that was, we thought, literally that, more fun and kind of go after and build something that would allow us to do the things we enjoyed in the law and provide help to people in the manner that, allowed our clients to get a benefit while also us getting a benefit. And that led us to Longship. And so we founded that in July of last year, and we haven't looked back since. So, we're a new firm in that sense. But as you heard from the introductions, I've been in private practice for 13 years. So you add it up, we've got quite a few years of doing this. And so that was it. Through that, we're just like any other kind of startup in a sense, right? Like had to find our product market fit, had to go out and see how we could grow from, zero to something bigger than that. And in there, we looked at, we'd always done, maybe because intellectual property kind of lends itself to it, a bit of fixed fee work in addition to billable hours. And we decided the billable hour was no fun for anybody. Lawyers don't like it. The clients don't like it. And since we were starting over, we decided we were having a conversation about how to set rates and what to do. And we decided, why would we use the billable hour? And we thought about it for a few minutes and decided to see if we could not do it. And so that led us here. We work on subscriptions and fixed fee projects, and we've had a lot of fun doing that. And I think our clients have really enjoyed it too. And at the end of the day, it's still legal work. It's still law, but it gives us a chance to actually know our clients, know their businesses, and help them with, what they actually need, we feel, instead of just kind of doing transactional work so that we can bill a set of hours at the end of the month.
Any gaps to fill in there, Dave?
I just want to springboard off of what Tim said, which is that, as Tim said, Longship Legal is the result of an evolution conversations that Tim and I have had over a long period of time. And one of the frustrations that I was feeling, having done, client work basically from sort of both sides, was that the work that we were doing wasn't necessarily aligned with the best interests of the company, not necessarily from a legal point of view, but from, it was my experience that using the billable hour, we kept having to have these sort of recurring conversations with clients about bills. And my experience was that repeatedly took us out of alignment with the client. Right. And that's incredibly frustrating. So that was one aspect of it. The other was that the work that we were doing, I wanted to have a deeper conversation with the clients about what was the purpose for the business of the work that we were doing. Right. So the job that I had previously, I was, drafting patent applications and prosecuting patent applications, and, we were doing high volume work, but very often the question would come up, so why are we doing this? What is the business goal behind this? What is the sort of business goal? What is the purpose of our doing this for the business? How does it benefit them long term? And unfortunately, we weren't always able to answer that question with clarity. So I found that really frustrating. As our conversation, Tim and my conversation, evolved, and we were leading toward what has turned into Longship Legal, we thought we would use the flat fee or subscription services as a way of putting ourselves back in alignment with the client, so that we could stop having these conversations about billing that was interrupting our relationship and basically putting us at odds, when instead we should be on the same team, aligned, and helping them move their business forward.
So you both done a really good job of already explaining sort of the why. But now I think it'd be useful for my listeners to figure out the how you set about to go and do that, right? What books did you read? What things did you listen to? What articles? Did you just try building the ship and experiment, going back to the startup analogy, right? Which you are a startup, just not a high growth startup. So, how did you go about doing it? And feel free to, go beyond that, the answer to that specific question. But I think if this is somebody's first episode too, that they're listening in and they're thinking like, well, okay, yeah, I agree with everything that Dave and Tim just said, but how the heck am I going to do this? Well, how the heck did you do it?
Yeah. So there's a lot there, but so the first is how you're going to do it is decide to do it, right? It's the cliche of any journey, that just 1,000 miles, whatever it is, your distance you throw in starts with the first step. So first you have to decide to do it. We came at it a little lucky in that this is, Dave's got 25 plus years of being an attorney. I was in the Navy before I went to before I went to law school, I did 8 years as a supply officer in the Navy. And so procurement and buying things and like how to get services, how to staff contracts was second nature to that. And so bringing that sort of like, how do you do it question, I think one of our first conversations was like, hey, do we buy anything in our day-to-day basis, right? As Dave and Tim as human beings in our houses, right? Do we buy anything using a billable hour? And the answer was no, right? So how do we buy all that other stuff, right? And so the question was, looking to every other service contract we have, plumbers, roof cleaners, anything you deal with, your doctor, there's a million things where you work in a relationship where you interact. And so we look to that, and my experience in the Navy of staffing contractor support to fill logistics billets, right? To run warehouses and to do packing and crating and all those things. And you build it with a service contract, and you build it with an understanding of what work is going to be done and what you need. And so for us, we sat down and maybe over-engineered it because we're engineers, but we decided, okay, we're going to come up with a set of things that we do, our basic products, we're going to look at what those are and define them out for ourselves. Of at first, it was little kind of quick sentences, and that quickly became like, okay, bullet points of what we do. And then we're going to sit down and figure out what we think is a fair value for that, if that was going to be it. And so that's how we built packages of subscriptions for ourselves. And at first it was, I think what we did 3 at first. Now we're kind of up to 4 on the subscription side of kind of different ways you can do it. And then for our specific transactions, we looked at land, we had been doing intellectual property and business law consulting. I'd been doing litigation. David always had from his business experience, had more contracts and interaction on the business side. We looked at what we did. We decided quickly, like, litigation of a 2-person firm is probably not while it's fun, it is not where we are going to succeed in the short term. So put that to the side and then look at the other things we could do. And, went to looking at what they are and deciding what is a fair price for how those would work out, of what made basically how much work was needed to do something. So if we use an example of a patent application, we look at, if you're converting it, how much work is done. If we classify it on like an A to D level, right? Like sort of like grading in school. And depending on how much is there, we decide what is the fixed transaction cost to do that conversion, with the understanding that what we disliked in our previous firms, and Dave's worked at more of them, was you didn't always have a chance to interact with the client and find out what their need was. And so we baked that in, and we decided from day one, we're not going to do work for folks just on a phone ring. I need X, do X, right? We were going to meet with you, have a discussion, see what's up, treat it more like a boutique medical practice in a sense, right? Of like this holistic approach. And so we built that, right? We have Excel spreadsheets and that exists in the back. We use Clio for our back end software. So we have shopped around. If anybody ever wants to know about the landscape of legal management systems in the summer of 2023, call me. I'll give you a rundown on everybody. And so that has the ability to do fixed price transactions. And we looked at it and built our system that allowed us to bill clients, push things out, take payments into trust or take things into regular transactions. We run it through there, and and that was it. We had to do the hard work of sitting down and mapping it out. But as soon as we did that, it sort of sold itself. And then for us, the benefit became right away. That same work to define how we would operate, right, flows back into the other pieces of the business of sales to then talk about it, and then marketing. And so that was over the course of last summer, kind of building that out. And like you said, Matthew, though, it's always evolving. Every good business should be growing and changing all the time. If you say, oh, I like it how it is today and I want to stop, I wish you all the luck in the world, but my experience is that is not a recipe for continued success. You need to at least be asking yourself questions and changing. So it's modified a little bit, but that's sort of the underlying kernel of how we got to it over last summer. I don't know, Dave, if there's any other kind of cool highlights or things I missed on that.
I think you touched on everything. I was going to just expand a little bit on what you said, what you ended with, in terms of once we had built out the products and how we were going to charge for them on a fixed fee or subscription basis, the way that sort of foundation piece flowed into the rest of the business, and we were able to build our marketing and sales operation around that. And in terms of building the software backend that supported all of that, having made that decision early on affected and guided us in the other shopping and purchasing that we needed to do. And I guess too, one thing that Tim has taught me is don't be afraid to go shopping, or always be shopping for something before you actually need it, so that you are able to turn it on when you need it. That's been a successful strategy for us so far as well.
That's a huge point I want to emphasize, because I definitely did that. I mean, I was like looking into things for like 2 years before leaving a practice to start my own practice, but it's something it was so natural. I didn't actually think to call it out to Dave. And so the fact that you just called that out is great. I would also like to say I am always shopping, right? Like continuously, because there might be some better solution out there that I'm just not aware of yet. And that's what I love about this podcast is I have guests who come on and tell me about the technology they're using that I may have never heard of. So one action, multiple outcomes, right? With the pod. But that's fantastic. Do you think, and we'll start with Dave here, do you think all your years of experience in practicing law helped you like design these products and this model that you have? Or do you think there would have been a way to do it? Like if some third year law student is like, well, I want to go solo and I like what Longship Legal's doing and I always wanted to do IP, like what's stopping them from just doing it while you have so many years of experience? So like what did those years of experience give you? Could you think you could have done it without that? And what resources are out there that even with those years of experience you wanted to tap into when designing these legal products, as you both put it?
Right. I mean, okay, so let's just acknowledge that's kind of a tough question to answer because I, obviously can't strip away all the experience and think, how would I have done this beforehand? And the answer to that, just speaking for me personally, is probably badly.
Yeah.
Without all of those years of experience. And honestly, we're doing the best we can right now. But more to the point, can a new law student or younger lawyer go out and use the billable hour without years and years and years of experience? Yes, absolutely. I think they can. But what you would need to do in that case is be very conscious of all of the other factors in your business. You need to be aware of your costs. Like any business, you have to treat it like a business. You have to be aware of, what is it going to cost you to run the business? What kind of revenue can you generate? What does the cash flow, what do you think it's going to look like? How do you realistically, honestly have the hard conversation with yourself about how is that going to grow realistically? What honestly, one process that Tim and I went through as we were thinking about starting this business was exactly that thought process. What do we think like a moderate scenario looks like for the next 6 to 12 months? What does a high side scenario look like? What does a low side scenario look like? And, you have to have those honestly have those conversations as truthfully and as bluntly as you can, because that you got to plan ahead for reality. So if someone who doesn't have decades of legal experience wants to do this, they, like anyone, I think you're well served to treat it like a business and approach it from that perspective. You don't have to build it around an hourly rate. You can put products together like any other service provider and approach your business in that manner. But it has to be a business-like approach, I think.
Yeah, I think you'd asked a previous question, books that we read. I like reading. I still go to the public library, and now I've just switched sections, right? So I don't read Patrick O'Brien books about Master and Commander anymore. I go over to the business section. But there's Michael Gerber, the E-Myth is a interesting one that folks, and I think Dave's point of treat it like a business. That was actually the first thing we did before we ever incorporated, was sit down and come up with a business plan and actually figure out, is there a way to make money? And some of that, I think lawyers in general, having been a partner at a law firm, I can tell you it is not inherent in lawyers' nature to treat law firms like businesses. They often find anyone who owns a law firm that's probably not Matthew Kurbis, right? And they're going to say, there's some level of, alchemy and all kinds of things going on, and law firms are special, right? They're not. They're businesses. At the end of the day, you need to sell something, make a profit on it that is enough to allow you to operate. And in general, for law firms, you're going to either need, debt, or you're going to need revenue reinvested. So the profit needs to be somewhere to grow. And when you sit down and think of it that way, whether you're a third year law student deciding to hang a shingle, or you're a, middle-aged, set of guys deciding to go out on their own, you end up in the same place, which is all businesses. Hopefully, if you like podcasts, you can find a bunch of them talking about how businesses in general, not every business owner thinks that, right? They started out, everybody that is telling their story of success eventually got there, but most people don't start that way. And you can quickly end up in what we call, cribbing from, I can't even remember where, contractor prison, right? Which is where you're just doing enough work to pay basically maybe the bills in order that they're due. but you don't have enough above your revenue, or you don't have enough people, and you don't have an idea of where you're going, and your life is far worse off than it would be even billing 3,000 hours in a Manhattan law firm, right? And so that was what we did, is that business plan led to an idea of what would the packages need to be, what would the products need to be, what price point would we need to sell them at. The only benefit we had that somebody who was in the third year of law school wouldn't have themselves was an understanding of what like the market rates were and the price points. But a third year law student could network into that information, right? Like literally go ask people. They come to law school, like if every law school is the same, right? There's all these lawyers there that show up occasionally on Wednesday afternoons for some type of thing. Literally ask them what they do and then ask them what they charge, right? And they will tell you, because that is law sales, right? And so it's not a secret. You just have to ask it and then find what you want to do, and find a point that'll allow you to, meet your needs to grow, put those together. And it sounds easy as we say it here, but it requires that work, and you'll seem a little weird, like your law school friends, even there'll be other people hanging shingles that are just like, hey, well, I bought an ad or something, like I did X and I've got somebody calling. You'll be able to do it. The trick though is, depending on, like, we're business attorneys that focused on, B2B sales, but there's a lot of fixed price transaction going on in the market. Like DUI attorneys generally are charging a fixed rate for a first DUI. Most criminal defenders are operating in that way, depending on the charge. And so in the market, even if you hang a shingle and don't bill yourself as a subscription or fixed price attorney, a lot of areas do tend towards that fixed transaction work anyway. So you'll find out quickly what the market will bear. So that it's a long way to get at advice, but business plan, think about how you're going to make money, and then start executing on that as best you can, and you'll get better as you try to execute on it.
Yeah. Perhaps even a good follow-up question that you kind of already addressed it would be that, okay, so it's one thing to, like, how do I learn the stuff to competently practice the law? But then what about how the heck do I know what the right pricing is based on my experience, which is hard to say, in particular when you've been billing your time and moving to a fixed and or subscription-based pricing model. I mean, and frankly, I just made it up personally.
Yeah, no, that work. You're not like, that's a great way, right?
That's not wrong.
Right. Like my father-in-law used to work for Prince tennis rackets, and they would never know what the price point was for a new racket, right? And so they would, and forgive me, Prince, if I'm getting this story entirely wrong, or it was a different tennis company, but the way the story is told to me is they would pick a mid-range price point for a new, like, Agassi racket back in the 90s. They would put it on shelves, and they would look at the sales volume for the next month. And if basically comparing 2 months, if the sales volume was going up, they'd tell the retailers to raise the price, right? And that would just go until the sales volume slightly fell off, and they would leave it there. And that was how you priced tennis rackets in a now that's retail goods, but that your exact thing of pick a point and go. The benefit of the business plan is what a floor is. You're like, hey, I cannot do this for $10, right? And so you have an idea of what is your setting, but as long as you've got an idea of what will allow you to keep the lights on, that's a perfectly great approach to business. And for us, I mean, we're getting far away from legal advice here, but this is the gift it gives us of operating this way, is we get to have a lot of business conversations, especially with our mid-market and small clients, right? Of, hey, let us actually help your business, because law doesn't exist in its own, it doesn't exist in its own world. It does maybe in a litigation, but all your transactional legal support is there to help your business, right? It's either to help it in the future to avoid a litigation, or it's to help it define its relationships now with your employees, with your suppliers, with your even with the government, of what you have rights to in intellectual property, right? And if you don't know the business side of it and what succeeds there, you can give advice, but it's just like randomly shouting out directions in a car, like turn left, turn right. Well, where are we going? I don't know. Turn left, turn right. And so this is what we like doing every day, is mixing that, find out what your business need is, and find out how law can support it. So yeah, we could talk all day on how to build a business, right? But all law firms are businesses.
So speaking of, and something you kind of mentioned earlier, is in particular when you're a small business that's in a small shop, you got to do sales, right? And you sort of brought that up. And when I talk to law students, I like to remind them, if they want to go into private practice, they are also in sales, which is not something you think about when you're an attorney. Even if you go big law, eventually, you're going to be a partner and you're going to be expected to bring in some business, right? So even in the traditional model, you're in sales, but especially when you do what we do, you're in sales. And so curious to know how you're going about selling this new business model to, and it sounds like you are serving more institutional clients who are used to maybe hiring attorneys, paying a billable rate. So tell me about your lessons that you've learned from having to sell this different model to clients, and also in general, their feedback to you on how it's working for them.
So I don't want to oversimplify, but we haven't honestly had to work that hard at selling the billing model to clients, right? They immediately understand, by and large, what no one has said to me, gosh, I have no idea what that means. I'd rather pay you by the hour. Not once have I had that conversation. Prospects and clients completely understand what that is. They immediately typically understand the benefit of it. And so selling the flat fee, subscription fee, project-based work has not been really an issue. What has been a learning curve for us is learning how to do marketing and sales as a business operation. That's been an interesting journey. As Tim said earlier, we've had to learn how to find product market fit, which, involved a process of thinking really hard about what is our ideal client and defining an ideal customer profile or ideal client profile, learning how to go out in the world and find those people, go out in the world and find ways to talk to them that discover their needs, their pain points, the things that they need solved that we can help them with. And so that has been, I would say, comparatively a greater challenge than, as part of the sales process, or certainly part of the initial conversation with them. We certainly slide in the fact that we do things on a fixed fee or subscription basis. Usually the response to that piece of our explanation or our story is a pleasant surprise. Oh, so that's what you do. Okay, that's great. And there are some questions like, how does that work? We've had some clients ask us, actually somewhat concerned, probably the folks who have worked with hourly basis lawyers for so long that they, like a lot of attorneys, have a hard time wrapping their heads around the idea that, I'm not going to get an hourly bill at the end of the month or at the end of the project. How does that work? We have literally been asked by someone, how do you make money? Are you okay? And, we've had to reassure him that, no, it's fine. Subscription basis actually works just fine.
Yeah. I've definitely gotten that question from clients and attorneys alike, or prospective clients and attorneys alike, right? And I think if you're doing it right and you're providing such incredible value, or at least the possibility of providing great value to a client, and they see what you're charging and they have that reaction, I think in a traditional business world, you might think, well, I've got to jack up my prices. But since you're thinking about lifetime value, and you want this client to stay subscribed to you and feel like they're getting incredible value, where as long as you believe you're getting sufficiently compensated on a monthly basis for the work that you're doing, and you could have that client forever, the value to them is over a decade's approach, as opposed to a project-based, I get one bite at the apple approach, right? I know you all have only been doing this for, not quite a year yet, but that's the mindset. Am I right to say that that's your mindset with that?
Yeah, no, you don't mind. Yes, that is certainly one of the approaches that we take to clients. Is when we're talking to prospective clients, we talk to them about building a long-term relationship, and the billing model is part of that approach, right? We want to be aligned with you. We want to be part of the ongoing business conversation that you are having in your business. So we want to be on phone calls. We want to be in meetings, and we want you, the client, to feel like you can include us in those ongoing processes, operations, meetings, gatherings, what have you, without hearing the sound or feeling the meter running in the background, right? So this, and so sort of back to what we were talking about a second ago, It's not so much the need to explain to clients what the flat fee model or subscription model would look like to them. It's really more of getting them to, I guess, truly believe that they can have a relationship with their attorney where they're not afraid of billing, that they're not afraid to call their attorney on the phone, they're not afraid to loop us into a meeting, that is actually part of, it's built into the service that we provide, and it's built into the structure that we've already discussed and agreed on, and there's not going to be a surprise about that. And that actually turns out to be the biggest hurdle in some ways, or the biggest challenge when talking to folks, is getting them to really sort of understand the implications for them of the improved service that they will receive from their attorneys.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the learning curve for us, right? Is on that sales and making people understand that benefit you're dead right. Any professional, any service-based professional, is to reach the top, right? You're always, in any organization, you're going to be somehow involved in selling that organization, right? Like whether it's just through raw pride of what you do, or whether it's an affirmative sales job, you're going to be putting forth into the universe what you do and how you make money doing it, and that you would like to do that again for someone else and have them pay you, right? And so for us, like the other benefit, this is internal to us, but it doesn't free up time. You're still working, but it allows you to, and this is putting on my hat back from the Navy days, it allows you to manage the work in a different manner, where you're not directly associating one unit of work time with one unit of compensation, and you are instead perhaps putting 10 units of work time to one compensation. I mean, a lot of times the clients are the ones getting the better value. In the old system, it was the value accrued to the attorneys in almost every single sense. This doesn't, but it actually is easier for us to manage in a sense, right? So the benefit for us is that management. And what does that do? It frees up time to actually go, pick up a book on sales, to listen to a podcast on not attorney sales even, and it allows you to know, okay, I have this project, or I have this amount of, I plan on having this meeting with this client this time. I'm having these meetings with these clients, and you organize your day around that, and it allows you to actually take something which I'd heard, time blocking, but never made sense in law firms, right? Like this whole world of time block. You're like, what is that, right? Like you're like, I'd bill as 6-minute increments, just run. And as soon as I close one file, open the next one. And it allows you to do that, so you can block time. You're like, I know I need this amount of hours. I'm going to do the morning on this, and then to have time for you to grow your business. And that it's a twist on that Charlie Munger, as when he was an attorney before he became a massive investor, right? God rest his soul. He said, pay yourself an hour first, right? In his law firm days at the real estate firm, I believe it was in California, he was his first client in the morning, right? And well, this pushes it through where you can manage that into other times of the day, and work on your business in addition to working for your clients. And when you put that together, you actually have the chance to grow and learn and do things, and everybody benefits, because you can also, what you learn working on your business, you can turn to your clients and say, hey, have you ever thought of this? Or, hey, I saw this interesting thing. So yeah, and it's the long answer. And in the back end, we do things that I've never seen. People sell law CRM systems and things like that. We use Salesforce. We're actually on our third CRM system, but that's also given us approaching it in that rigid structure, not just, hey, we bill hours and you're going to pay us for work. We've tried to go back and build the back end of the business so that it's actually an ongoing business. And yes, it's in its infancy, but the goal would be at year 3, we know how to grow it. We know how to do things in it. We understand what changes we want to make to see what they have, and we can A/B compare things, as opposed to just letting it be the Wild West of, I hope the phone rings, or I hope someone sees this billboard and calls us.
Dave, that gave you any ideas, run with it. Otherwise, I've got more questions.
I did want to, that did give me an idea. So Tim is right that the ease of management of using subscription flat fee billing structure, that is absolutely true. But what I was thinking of was the other implications for the business overall. We mentioned our metaphor of contract or prison a minute ago. So it's incredibly important for any business owner to not get so caught up in working in the business that they can no longer work on the business. And so one benefit to using the subscription model is it actually enables you to step back and have that perspective. One thing you can do at that time, certainly what we've done with it, is learn how to be better business people, learn how to run the business, learn marketing operations, what's involved in that, what are the steps, how do we do what we need to do for Longship Legal, how do we translate that into sort of sales operations, down to the nuts and bolts of the actual words that we would use in the conversation, and how we would help guide prospects through a sales funnel, those sorts of things. So what not only does that help us in our business, but that helps us tremendously in our relationships with clients, because now we understand the problems that they're facing. We're able to have business conversations with them, which is actually why we're doing this in the first place. So it is very much a feedback loop, very positive learning experience for us, and one that hopefully, our clients would tell you they benefit from as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like myself, I'm representing a lot of small business owners, that when you yourself are a business owner, whatever size, and the things that you're learning and that you're figuring out and that you're problem solving that you don't necessarily traditionally think of as like a legal thing, but we have the lawyer brains, right? We've been trained to think in the legal way. Applied to business, we're actually pretty good at business if we actually take the time to apply ourselves in that way, like both you talk about. If you time block that time and you do the working on the business, now we can be so much more than just legal counsel to our business clients. We are now strategic advisors beyond just the legal, which no client will pay for at a billable hour rate when you're only paying for the legal stuff. And so, like, you're able to provide additional value on top of that. And I've actually found, I'm curious to know what your perspective is, but very early on, I realized that, and I started to sell that as added value. But at least my potential clients who found me through intention of I'm looking for a lawyer didn't care about that. They just cared about, I have a legal problem, I want legal solution. So I had to tone that down. And then after they were a client and I was working with them for a little bit, now I could start to just show them. It's like the classic, what's the difference between a good story and a bad story? When you have a lot of exposition, it's boring and you don't like it. You want the movie or the book to show you what's happening, not tell you what's happening, right? You don't want characters to talk about it. You want the scenes to be shown to you. And I've discovered it was a similar thing with this added value stuff. Just show them the added value, and it's not necessarily something they want to be told about. Have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah, maybe a little bit, but I think too, it comes at, for us, maybe is looking in that exact B2B, like, so it depends, I think, a little bit on the clients, but it also is like, that is what we are looking for. Like, if you are not looking to invest now in strategic support for your legal needs so that you can reduce the impact of problems later, and like we're not going to gel with, not that we wouldn't gel with you, but like that, we're not looking for someone to pick up the phone and say, I need a patent now, right? Like if they say that, we will immediately, in part of our sales cycle, turn to the why, right? And we will want to know that first. And to somebody who doesn't like that being asked that why, we're just not going to gel, right? And that's fine, right? The world is full of, like, law is $1 trillion industry, right? Like there is a lawyer for everybody. If you don't like your lawyer, go shop for a different lawyer. There's other ones, right? Like hopefully you'll like, Matthew, Dave, and Tim, right? And come in. Or if you don't, though, there's other people, right? Like, and so but that what you raised there is the point. That is for us from our kind of like land and spread strategy, is looking at what do we know best. We, on a day-to-day basis, know intellectual property like the back of our hand. So if you need patents, copyrights, trademarks, trade secrets, call us. And the business implications of why you would need those, pushing back down to you need those if you have products or if you're doing that, like all the things that come to that, right? Of like how a purchase agreement impacts your intellectual property rights. Like that's how we have seen the world, or, you know, I mean, I used to work at the patent office, right? So that is the worldview that is second nature to us, which is where land and spread from there, build the business from what we know is the kind of way we approach. And so for us, you're talking about intellectual property. If that's what got you to be interested in calling the Longship, unless you're calling about litigation, which we're not currently helping with today, although we'll talk to somebody, right? But you don't have an emergency. You have a legal right that is existing in its max beneficial state far in the future. And so we find if you're selling that, oh my gosh, this is an emergency, and that's the first conversation you have with someone, it's a weird state to be in that IP world. And so we focus on that future state. And I think you're right, Matthew, and that absolutely could happen. For us, like where the targeting is in our marketing and our sales approach, we don't find that too often because we're looking at that B2B client, you know, like we were looking at a business. I mean, that's one of our tripwires. We absolutely will talk to you, but one of the first, if you're just starting out, you're like, hey, I'm new in a new startup, I got a great idea or something. One of our tripwires is, have you worked on incorporating? Have you talked about what kind of business structure you want to have? And you will run into people who are like, you know, no, I'm going to do that later. I want this patent now. And it's like, wait a second, we got to back up. Like, why are you asking about a trademark? Why, like, they only exist to further your business plans. And if you have a great story of why you want to be a, you know, non-incorporated sole proprietor, I'd love to hear it. But that is usually not the, you know, correct risk profile for a long-term success. So, you know, that's sort of from what we're looking to do when we say chase the fun is very nerdy, intellectual property, but that also is sort of a sorting function on who will find us appealing. I don't know if that helps kind of see maybe the difference of why we haven't run into that yet. Or Dave does a great job on screening. That could be the other reason, right? Like,
I'm sure it's that actually.
Yeah. So I want to go back to this idea that you were talking about time blocking, right? Because this is sort of the thing that it's such a useful tool in your toolbox of non-billable hour attorney. I mean, and even I will say, even when I was billing time, I did like a version of time blocking, which is I would try to plan out my next day of 10 billable hours that I could possibly bill the next day. And it was an estimate because you don't know how long things are going to take, right? And then like try to block sections of my day to do that. And usually I was a litigator, so morning was blocked for court. Yep. And then afternoon was blocked for drafting, researching, all that stuff, talking to clients, talking to attorneys, right? So it's kind of time blocking, but not really in that way. But what's super valuable about that, and when you're not billing your time is, okay, I blocked an hour to get this task done, but it only took me 30 minutes. And that's a good thing when you're not billing your time, right? Because you have an inverse relationship between time and money. Because now, like, the less time I spend on something, the more money I make, and I can move on to the next task. Or going back to something we talked about in the pre-show conversation, this availability that you have for other things that are personal, not even necessarily business. We had a very business-focused conversation, but something that I can't remember which one of you brought it up, but this emotional availability increases, and we came to like this detoxing from the billable hour idea. And when you're time blocking and you finish a task early, I think that's where that detox could start to set in, because now you don't have to rush to pick out that next file and open up that file. You can like just take a breath. You could go if you work from home, or you go for a walk if it's nice outside. You know, you could give yourself a break. You could do that Charlie Munger thing and invest in yourself a little bit, and that helps you be a better person, which helps you be a better lawyer for your clients, which is not available to you when you're billing your time, right? So what's been your experience with that?
Well, that was definitely Dave. We both agree, but I know Dave used the detox. You know, that is his point. So I'll let him go first for sure.
I mean, I think, Matthew, you just summarized it beautifully. I mean, I can but agree with you and just, you know, share my experience with that was that, you know, at many points in my career, especially working at law firms, where that pressure was constant and relentless, and maybe this says more about me, I always felt that pressure somewhere in the back of my brain on weekends, on vacations, you know, times that I in retrospect, wish I had been more present for my friends, my family, things that were not strictly speaking work related. There is really something to the billable hour model that I feel is a sort of constant pressure and a constant drain on bandwidth in, your heart and mind that you can't apply elsewhere. And one thing I've found since leaving that behind is being more sort of basically being able to be more present in whatever it is that I'm doing and being more available, being, I think, a better father, a better husband.
Yeah. Yeah. Tim,
Or at least try.
Yeah. But what you could do, you have time to do that now, right? I mean, like that's the idea anyway. Tim, what's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. So I work from home. We've got, I've been working home for years. Like the difference is, I mean, somewhat, I think everybody that strikes out on their own is looking for an increase in agency, right? And would hope they would find it in what they control. But for us, it's very easy. It's like, okay, this is the start time of the day. You have projects and efforts, so you can block them in the true time block sense, right? Of here's an hour that I'm going to dedicate to it, and then you can work your day in a set of hours or 4 hour, whatever you want, right? Like, and the difference being is it works both ways too. If it takes longer, right, you can stack your day based on importance. This is primary, right? So if it takes longer than an hour, you can slide the next thing over and keep working on it, as opposed to wondering, how much would we billing of, this, or, oh, will the client pay this fee, or and it completely decouples the two of the value. And so, yeah, it does work out that way. And I don't know, it's fun. Like it to me, like maybe I'm just a over process engineering of it, right? But it takes your day of a bunch of 6-minute increments and goals to switch from file to file as quick as possible, and wondering when you're going to be off task or on task when phone calls happen. And you leverage a little bit of modern technology. Like I think you've seen, we use schedulers the same as you do, right? And you allow people to see your calendar and to grab times on it. But you can now look and say, okay, I have meetings or calls or this podcast at these times. This is what I need ahead of time. This is where we can interact. You put on, you change your mind to have like standing appointments of like, hey, we call it our founders call every day. We have a call half hour on the schedule where we're going to talk to each other, and we prioritize those things. And so you let that push, and you can then give the clients, you can say like, hey, I see I'm free on this Thursday morning, what time's good for you? And so it gives you that agency back, which probably you could have, like Matthew, your story of like, by kind of whiteboarding out what you're going to do tomorrow is more effort than I think I ever put into it, even though I was trying to do some level of where does this fit. But I don't know, maybe it's easier. Maybe it's just mental. It's like you agree to make a change with yourself and you come, whatever it is, even if it's a raw placebo effect, it works. And because that's how everything else works. Even like if you're, when I was at the patent office, we arguably recorded a timesheet, right? I'm not advocating that labor management doesn't involve how long people work and how much capacity they have. I'm not saying that. It's not a panacea of like switch the billable hour and never work again, right? It's just a way to program. But anytime you go pick up a book on time management, not anytime, but like most of the time, that's directed to somebody who works a typical 8-hour, project-based day or 8-hour shift work, right? Whether it is an hourly wage job, you're still like, even if you're working, years ago, I read somebody, I forget who it was, their thing on how to become a writer. And they were like, get a job in a toll booth on the New York Expressway. We'll give you a bunch of time and you'll know exactly when you start and when you leave, right? But even if you're working that job, you're blocking, I'm in the toll booth for this amount of time, as long as I'm not making change, I can imagine. Whereas on the billable hour, you'd be sitting in that toll booth stressing about, was I handing quarters out the door or getting them back in, making change, because I only recoup, even though I have to be here manning the toll booth from 9 to 5, I only get compensated at the end of the year based on how much change it's a weird, it is. If it was a great management system, that is how they would run factories. Like there is like, I'm not advocating for labor versus management or anything, but like literally, if it was the best way to manage human beings, other people would be copying it, and no one is copying the billable hour as far as I'm aware. Right? Like
so true. Only law firms.
Yeah, well, and we're all trying to get out of it, right? Like we're either complaining about it or doing something about it. And there's not a single lawyer even running around saying the billable hour is great. So yeah, and it's there's more wrapped into it of why someone founds a business or a law firm, but that is a big part of ours is we looked at it and that was how to chase the fun, was to switch to that.
Yeah. Dave, is a hot dog a sandwich and why?
This is a great question. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Boy, that's a good question. Yes, I think a hot dog is a sandwich. If, your definitional boundaries of the sandwich are the bun and you have some material in there, sandwich by definition having something inside of it. So sure, let's go with the, cheap and easy answer.
All right. So Tim, is a hot dog a sandwich and why?
So I am going to go with no, a hot dog is not a sandwich for the same sort of reasons, but I think that is the subspecies of many bread wrapped meat foods, right? So you get into like quesadillas, tacos, those things. They're all separate entities on which a sandwich also falls, or a shepherd's pie type thing. There's a lot of things you can put pot pie type stuff. Like bread around meat is the maybe genus. I don't know what we would call all those, but sandwich is just the subspecies.
Yeah, I think this is maybe the second time shepherd's pie was dropped in response to this question. Although I don't remember if they maybe came out on the other end of it, believe it or not.
I think you could go either way. Like the real question, if you really wanted to lawyer it out, is let's have hours upon hours of what is the definition of a sandwich first. Then we'll dive about like what is the definition of a hot dog, what is the definition of a bun, and then look for all the exceptions and throw in a nice some act of God type clause or something on all of our, so how much that would be 10 pages and the lawyerly exceptions and A pages would be another 20 on whatever definition we came to.
Right. Absolutely. Right. I mean, obviously the answer is it depends, but it's good to get real answers from folks while we're on here. And so Tim, for you, what's the best way if people want to reach out?
The best way to reach me is by email at tim.johnson@longshiplegal.com or on LinkedIn, either the Longship Legal page or my personal page on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with folks. Pretty much these days, don't ever say no to a connection request, or you can message me that way. But the email's the easiest. We also have our website, longshiplegal.com. There's a contact page there. And we do have a phone number, and, shout out, it's worked pretty well so far, to one of those like outsourcing the back end of a law firm. We use an answering service through Ruby, and that will eventually, you'll either get a message depending on our availability, or it'll connect you straight to my cell phone or Dave's, depending on who you ask for, if we're available. So,
all right.
Sounds
good. Tim and Dave, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us. It was awesome. I appreciate it. It's great to meet you, and thanks for inviting us, and looking forward to seeing more of your episodes, and great success for all subscription attorneys over the long haul. I think it's time for a change. So thank you for having us.
And Dave, if people wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Oh, they can reach me at david.hyams@longshiplegal.com. Thanks really very much for having me. This is great.
Over the long haul from Longship Legal, thank you very much. All right, bye-bye. And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn, since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.